Hey YouTube, Awesome Rider here. Welcome to my review for the Kikai Sentai Zenkaiger Zenkai Red special. So this was a two-part special episode event that they put up on their YouTube streaming service or something like that introduced this character of Zenkai Red. It takes place kind of after the special Red movie we didn't get to see yet. So those events influence it a little bit. And it had two episodes, so I'm going to kind of review them individually a little bit and then talk about them as a whole. But overall, I did enjoy them. So the first one kind of picks up with Kaito addressing his insecurities about being a non-Red Ranger leader, where he met all the other Red Rangers and he's like, you know, you're not a Red, so he's feeling weird about that, and then that leads to a conversation between him and the rest of the team, sort of bringing up that Zenkaiger is a unique Sentai. I mean, Red Ranger's not their leader, and they're like weird with robots and stuff, and it's all very kind of meta, and that's kind of the main running plot of this entire storyline, which I actually really liked. I liked that they addressed it, I thought it was kind of cool and meta, and I also think that it really did some cool character stuff as well. And I like that, you know, he said, well, all the other Sentais have Red leaders, and then Navi says, well, you're kind of one of a kind in this world, so I wouldn't even really worry about it, and you're the only Sentai here. But of course, just in time for this conversation, they get called away to a fight scene, and Kaito is like tired and falling over during the fight because he hasn't been getting sleep because he's been worrying about this. And as a result, his performance isn't that great. So just in the nick of time, then Zenkai Red shows up all badass, and he has this really cool like finisher weapon move where he takes his changer and like creates a fine point of fire, like a fire blade torch thing, which is really cool. But he shows up and he's like, oh, I'm Zenkareto, and all that stuff. And it's really cool entrance, and I really like the suit. The Zenkaiger suit in general has grown on me, and this one is, you know, basically a repaint of it, but I think it looks really cool. And it's a cool concept. And then when they're back at the base kind of discussing this, his human form shows up and talks about how, you know, I'm going to start the real Zenkaigers, we can't have robots. He's basically anti-human gear like me. But he says humans have to protect the human world. And it's funny though because, you know, obviously Zenkaiger is a very different series from the look of it. I mean, they transform into robot forms, but this isn't the first time we've had non-human rangers, and it's not the fact that they're robots I think that's weird. I think it's that their suits look like robots, so it doesn't even make you feel like you're watching Sentai sometimes, which I'll talk about later on. But that's not unheard of. Like, this would seem even less weird to me if we had their Kikanoid forms, but then they transformed into regular Rangers, then it would seem less different. So, but I get what they were going for with it. But basically he says he's the original Zenkaiger and he wants to create the real Zenkaigers. And then later, like right after that, right after that, Gowan gets turned into a human, and that kind of starts something that happens for all of them later. Because then when they're at the battle later, they go to transform, and Gowan can't transform since he's a human. And then after Zenkai Red sort of witnesses them fumbling or whatever, he's like, I've seen enough, and he transforms and fights and wins the day and walks off all broody. And then Gowan follows him, and I presumed it was because he was like, okay, maybe this will be the real Zenkaigers, because earlier he was like, well, Zenkai Red has a point. But that turns out that's not the reason, but that's kind of the way they leave you off with that. And then at the very end of episode 1, Majin turns into a girl, and it's really funny because like Juran's way of testing to see if it's really Majin is, like, he says, do hopscotch, and he's like, it might be her. I thought that was really funny, especially since, like, I don't remember him questioning whether Gowan was himself. But regardless, I thought this was a really fun episode. I really liked the first episode. Like I said, I loved the concept of them sort of in a meta way addressing how different Zenkaiger is. I really liked seeing Zenkai Red. I thought he was a cool character. I thought it brought up an interesting debate. It ended on an interesting cliffhanger. They also had kind of a funny villain, which I guess was like a reuse of the one from the movie. I'm not sure. I really don't find anything out about the movies until they come out. But he's like normal world villain. And they talk about all these like Sentai tropes like, well, usually Sentai monsters grow big. And Sentais are led by Red Rangers, and I thought there was just some funny like meta jokes and commentary all throughout the episode. So I really enjoyed episode 1. I would have given it a 4 out of 5. I mean, I am giving it a 4 out of 5. I just meant if I was reviewing it individually. Now the second one I did enjoy, but I had a couple little problems with. But basically we pick up where we left off. Eventually Kaito hunts down Gowan, who's with Zenkaiger, and it turns out he's not with him because he wants to join the real Zenkaigers. He just wanted to figure out how he could turn back into human, and that was kind of a nice little beat there. And it was really funny because he's like, oh, Kaito, you found me because I left these breadcrumbs, and he's like, he literally left the biggest breadcrumbs possible. They want you to take the roles! The giant breadcrumbs was funnier than Kaito just guessing where he was. Also funny because at the beginning of the episode too, Majin's like can't do magic and they're trying to figure out what's going on, and Juran still doesn't believe it's her. Like, I don't know, I just thought that was really funny that he was suspicious of her the whole time. And then they get an invite from the villain to some sort of showdown, and it's clear the villains are behind something along this. And they all get invited to this, basically a duel. And when they're on the way there, Rune turns into a human, and then Juran turns into a human. And I like that Juran's older than everyone because he, you know, that's his character. And I thought that was funny. And they all arrive, and Zenkai Red arrives, and they look like they're going to do a henshin, and it's kind of... This, in a way, reminded me of Go Busters versus Go Busters, where that team-up sort of looked at, hey, this is what Go Busters would have been like if it was more of a traditional Sentai in these aspects. And that's kind of what this felt like, where this is what Zenkaiger would have looked like with a regular human team. I kind of low-key / high-key would have preferred this in a way. I said this on Twitter. It's not that I don't appreciate Zenkaiger's uniqueness, but like I said, and I've come around to the suit designs as well, but like I said, sometimes when I'm watching it, you know, when they morph and then they're fighting in the robot forms, it doesn't feel like I'm watching Sentai. And I hate to say that because I hate when people say it doesn't feel like this franchise when it's something new, but it just feels weird. It almost feels like I'm watching a backdoor pilot for a new type of toku within Sentai, so it just feels weird. But when I said I wanted to see this over what we got, I was more so talking about Zenkai Red. It is, I guess, kind of a nice change to have a non-badass Red for this anniversary, since for Gokaiger we did have a badass Red. But that being said, I would trade out a loudmouth lead character over anybody, any day of the week. So like, I would, even though Zenkaiger hasn't annoyed me as much as I thought he would, I would still trade him out for this character or just any generic, more stoic character, because I just hate that type of character. So that's kind of what I meant when I said I would rather see this, just I would rather see that type of lead. But basically they never get to transform, and then it results in the Changers disappearing. We find out the villains were behind all of this, turning them human and giving him the Changer and whatnot. But then Zenkai Red sees the Zenkaigers doing an unmorphed fight and is inspired by them actually being heroes, and he gets his Changer back, and Zenkaiser and Zenkai Red team up, and they destroy the monster together, and they both use the Lupin Ranger and Pat Ranger gears, which was a really smart way to use them. I mean, they're probably going to be used again at some point throughout the series, but it made a lot of sense since we had 2 leaders here, and that whole, you know, 2 leaders, 2 Reds within Lupat, and it was just a cool way of using that. And then after they defeat him, you know, they go on the Megazord, and Zenkai Red and Zenkaiser are both on the Megazord, and then at the end, the Changer still sticks around, and then they have that classic trash toku nonsense thing of like, why do I still have the powers? It's like, because it comes from your heart. I'm like, that's not a real answer. I just hate those type of toku nonsense answers. But basically, it kind of leaves off like, oh, Zenkai Red's going to be out there. He's kind of a frenemy now. He's going to prove to be the real Zenkai leader eventually. That's seemingly where they left it off. But then when Kaito's still questioning, like, well, am I a true leader? He goes into, like, this dream sequence with all of the White Rangers. Now, this was a nice scene. Let me talk about this first. I liked this scene a lot. It showed that, you know, because we know that there's other non-Red Ranger leaders. When they first opened up the episode, he's like, oh my god, all the other leaders have been Red Rangers. And my first thought was, what about Big One? I know that, obviously, Tsuruhime was one, as we'll see in a second. But my first thought was the Big One just because he was always in the center, you know, and it was a little bit non-traditional, kind of like this one. And so I was like, well, are they ever going to bring that up, or are they just going to ignore it for the sake of the plot? But they brought in some of the White Rangers that have led before. One thing I do want to address, though, is obviously everybody in this sequence is not actually a Red Ranger. Like, in order to make it look more impressive, they took literally any Red Ranger that had a substantial amount of white in their costume and sort of counted as a White Ranger. It's just really weird. Now, I feel like this opens up a further debate amongst fans who love to debate, like, who's the Sixth Ranger and who's the secondary rider. And honestly, that stuff never really matters too much to me. I just kind of have who I consider to be the Sixth Ranger, the secondary rider, based on past things. Like, I think that's a stupid, kind of frivolous debate, but I feel like that just opens up this debate for this unnecessarily. And I'm sorry, in this case, I'm putting my foot down that I'm not going to consider these Red Rangers to be White Rangers because they have white stripes on their costumes. I mean, this dude's name is literally Boken Red. It gives like a whole new meaning to whitewashing. It's weird. But again, I get it why they did it, just because it's going to look more impressive when you have more characters than like 3. And one of them is like Shishi Red, who's just using a White Ranger power-up. But at least it's sort of a White Ranger, but I think that's kind of funny. And Tsuruhime is demorphed, and she talks about how, like, it doesn't matter who you are or what Ranger color you are, you can be a Sentai leader. And I thought it was a nice, cool moment and a cool cameo, and I really liked it a lot, especially since I like Kaku Ranger. So I liked that scene. But then it appears that the whole thing was a dream. They did this thing with a balloon. I'm not sure what it's supposed to mean. Like, they focused on the balloon a couple times during the episode. and then at the end it floats away. I don't know if I just missed some sort of weird signal with that where it's kind of leaving it open whether it was a dream or not. But it seemed like it was all a dream at the end, which I hate, because I think the idea of Zenkai Red was so cool. Just because, again, it was kind of this meta plot addressing that the Zenkaigers are unique, but I think that could have made for a cool reoccurring character, like a reoccurring storyline about Zenkaiser and Zenkai Red vying for who might be the leader in the future. And since it's the anniversary, it could have been this cool competition between the two types of leaders we see, and it could have given the Zenkaigers an overall driving goal to prove their worth as a Sentai, but also keep their uniqueness. I think that could have been cool. I mean, there's a good chance we could see him down the line and they could, you know, re-retcon it, but as of right now, my only two problems with the second episode were, because I mostly enjoyed it, were if it remains a dream sequence, because I hate that, because I think this would have fit perfectly fine in there, and then, of course, even though it was a dream, I hate that explanation of the powers came from inside your heart and the hope of potatoes. It's like, stop with your toku nonsense. I just don't like toku nonsense, personally. But so those are the two things I didn't like. So I would have given this episode a 3 out of 5 just because of the dream sequence thing. But just speaking about the episodes overall, I really enjoyed them. It was better than your average Zenkaiger episode, I would say, at least some of the last average filler ones, which haven't been terrible, but I thought it was better than that. I thought it was a really cool and fitting meta story. Zenkai Red was really cool. I hope we get a figure for him, you know, in that new figure line and whatnot. And I just thought it was generally entertaining, and I think that, again, it's left at a dream sequence, but I think it opened up the possibility for a cool reoccurring storyline, which it doesn't seem like they're going to be taking advantage of. But I enjoyed it. If you are a fan of Zenkaiger, I definitely recommend checking this out. I think it is worth the watch, even if it does end up just being a dream sequence, self-contained. I think just as part of watching the anniversary season and like seeing them address Zenkaiger being so different, I think it was worth the watch. I would give the overall special a 4 out of 5. Even though I had some slight problems with it, I was very entertained by it. But what did you guys think of this episode? What did you think of Zenkai Red? Who would you prefer to lead the Zenkaigers? Let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you can notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.